When something happens to your kitchen, you might say,
"This is ludicrous."
but that won't fix your home. That will only get you the rapper, Ludacris.
Having trouble? Don't panic. Don't be alarmed. You need to file a claim? Holla at State Farm. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
That's right. You can file a claim on the app or call us.
Thanks, Mr. Chris.
No matter how ludicrous the situation, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
State Farm, Bloomington, Illinois.
I am paging Dr. Chanda.
I am the doctor.
And I'm a licensed clinical psychologist.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Paging Dr. Chanda podcast, all things related to the Black culture.
The doctor in front of your name.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? You are now tuned in to the Paging Dr. Chanda show, where we talk about all things related to life, culture, psychology, and everything else in between. Y'all, I am here with my good friend, and like my friend in real life, Phil Roundtree. And when I was thinking about having this conversation, Phil was definitely on the top of the list as somebody who can really dig deep into what's going on and the whole Diddy of it all. So, ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you Phil. Phil, introduce yourself to the people.
Introduce myself to the people.
Introduce yourself.
Wow. Word. So peace, everyone. I am Dr. Philip Roundtree, Philadelphia. Yeah. You gotta put some respect on my name.
Listen,
man.
No, because we was together in the trenches. You was here before I was doctor.
We were. You
Before
knew me when I was.
doctor.
Exactly. We was just regular, Sean and Phil.
Right, exactly.
You know what I mean? So that's the game. But I am Dr. Philip Roundtree. Phil_Roundtree. Feel free to give your brother a follow. Philadelphia, born and raised. I am a scholar activist, so I'm a professor. I'll be out in these activist streets.
Right.
I am a therapist. I'm a podcast host, so check out Rhetorically Speaking and hashtag You Good Man, both on YouTube or wherever you're streaming your content. And listen, man, I'm just somebody who is down for the people, down for the cause, man. So I appreciate you. It's nothing but love. I'm super proud of you, even though you be fronting on the brother. I see the penthouse background that you got popping off. That's just not something that you add to the background. That's just real life.
We don't add that in post. That's real life. That's not added.
That's exactly, that's the real Black excellence, right? Nah, but I appreciate you for having me to discuss. I know we joking a little bit right now, but to have a conversation on something that's serious and real.
For real. Yeah. No, I appreciate you for accepting the invitation. I know you're super busy, so to have you grace this platform, I think that myself as well as the Foxhole family, we're greatly appreciative of that. So let's hop right in, because like you said, you have a plethora of knowledge. You teach people all the time, and so I think that a lot of people are going to gain from this conversation. So we're talking about Diddy. We're talking about someone who was deemed as a mogul in our community. Before we get into the not so good parts or the bad parts, the horrific parts of the situation, I'm wondering, from your perspective, what would you say he meant prior to everything that's recently coming out?
So first I want to say like part of the issue that I have is I won't be referring to him as Puff, Diddy, as Love. His name is Sean Combs,
Period.
right? And so when we talk about this idea of like cognitive dissonance, right, part of that is being able to somehow, detach the person from the celebrity, right? And so we need to be mindful of that. Like Sean Combs did this, right? And everything that we're going to be discussing. And so, because that we're talking about the impact of accountability and what have you. So for me and mine, I know I use Sean Combs, because even if, and that's the thing, like people know him as Diddy, as Puff, as whatever.
Love.
But if Sean Combs so if Sean Combs pops up, unless you see him, it's just going to be, hey, you might not pay no mind for those who haven't followed his career for the last 30 or some odd years. So that's why I think it's important to use his government name.
Yeah.
Now, to your question, what was your question again?
No, I think that's a great point. Because you talk about cognitive dissonance, we're going to definitely hop into that. But what did you think, from your perspective, Sean Combs? What did he mean to the community prior to like everything coming out, like with the influence that he had, the impact?
I mean, when we talk about Sean Combs' impact, he was a music
Yeah.
mogul, right? He delved into fashion. He influenced us in those ways, and in those ways only, from my
Mhm.
perspective, right? He was a part of, some of my favorite songs that I enjoy. Even though, again, we talk about cognitive dissonance at 40 years of age, I can say that some of them were problematic. But
Yeah.
when we look at like Black culture, specifically
Mhm.
entertainment, he's played a significant part. So I got Biggie up in the background, my Funko Pop. He was influential in bringing Biggie to the forefront, for whatever that's worth.
Yeah.
So he's been influential in bringing people to the forefront in the entertainment
Yeah.
space.
And I think that's what makes it so difficult, right? Because like you said, like we see him as being this person who is this mogul who revolutionized hip hop, arguably, some would say, and also seeing this behavior that has recently surfaced. So I'm wondering from your perspective, like what were some of the thoughts and the feelings that came to mind when you saw the video, or if you saw the video, if you chose to see the video?
Yeah, I mean, so first for
Yeah.
me, he's just a man. Right?
Hmm.
He's just a man. He's fallible like everybody else. So because of his status, because of his wealth, I'm anti-billionaire for sure.
For
You know what I'm saying? So for even from that standpoint, I think he's been problematic in my
Can we
eyes.
stay
And then
there?
we hear about
Stay there. Stay there.
you
Stay there. Good.
stay there.
Yeah, like
Uh
because I didn't ask you about that, but he's been problematic. But there are so many people in our community who kind of look up to like billionaires because they're Black billionaires and don't necessarily see how harmful that is, and how detrimental it is, even yes, for the Black community.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was AOC, and I'm sure she heard somebody else say it. You know what I mean? But you don't make $1 billion. You take $1 billion.
Mm,
In order for you to have $1 billion, there's individuals who have to get the end of the
yeah.
stick. That's just what capitalism is, right? I remember when I used to wear Sean John fashion, right, and I'm paying $70 because Jay said another problematic person, we can't wear button ups no more. You know what I mean? I mean, you can't wear jerseys no
Right.
more. So I went and got button ups. I got me some Sean John joints. They might have been $50, $60. Well, overseas somewhere they're being paid 10 cents,
Yeah.
$2 in order to make these, in order for them to accumulate wealth. Right. And so, yes, somebody has to get the short end of the
Mhm.
stick. We've seen it throughout his career. Everybody who's ever worked with him or worked under him has had an issue with him, right? You think about, I was just listening to a podcast. He bought Biggie's masters for $20,000, right? He
20,000.
owns Biggie 20,000. He owns Biggie's masters, and he paid $20,000 for something that's worth seven figures. And then you look over the course of time, you look at Mace. Mace has consistently had an issue with him. You look at Sean, you look at the Locks, who's been vocal, and we talk about hard, quote unquote, street dudes, right?
Yeah.
Who, for some reason, this is where we got to get out this idea of because he dressed nice, that he not
Mhm.
slimy. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Like, we could look at Suge Knight and we could see him wearing his red and looking big and as this monstrosity, but Puff is just as
Yeah.
conniving, right? And just as shady and just as harmful. And so, yeah, he made his money off the backs of the people. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And now what do we get from it? We get a more money, more problems. You
Right.
know what I'm saying?
The
We
Diddy bop.
we we dance
Right.
to it. Exactly. We get that, but is it worth the trade-off? So when I say he's problematic as a billionaire for sure, but for me, he's just a man who makes
Yeah.
music. I think people fall trapped to and understandably so, because we know what music means to Black
Mhm.
folk and the vibrations and what is meant, ancestrally for us, right? And so I understand why it's so significant. We got soundtracks to our lives. There's certain songs that I can't listen to Carl Thomas, My First Love, without shedding a tear. You know what I mean? Because we recognize the influence and the time in our life when we engage with music and specific
Yeah.
music. So yeah, he plays a part in that, but we got to be mindful that he's just Sean Combs, a man.
I think because of the idolization that happens, especially like in our community, when we see somebody make it, we put them on that pedestal. It becomes like aspirational for a lot of people, and also that creates this sense of, like you said, that cognitive dissonance. Can you describe to the people like what that is and how we're kind of seeing that manifested?
Yeah, I mean, what we talking about where somebody's beliefs and actions just don't
Yeah.
align, right? So you could be like, yo, listen, I know that cigarettes are harmful for me, but I'm smoking. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? So it's this disconnect between, thoughts and beliefs and what one's actions are, right? And so again, we talking about hip hop culture. I don't listen to too many pods, but I was just listening to a pod and they was talking about Diddy,
Mhm.
right? And they had a scathing rebuke of his behaviors, right? His admitted
Mhm.
behaviors. And they were still using the term.
When something happens to your kitchen, you might say,
This is ludicrous.
but that won't fix your home. That will only get you the rapper, Ludacris.
Having trouble? Don't panic. Don't be alarmed. You need to file a claim? Holla at State Farm. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
That's right. You can file a claim on the app or call us.
Thanks, Mr. Chris.
No matter how ludicrous the situation, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
State Farm, Bloomington, Illinois.
The B word, right? The H word to describe women.
Wow.
So here you are saying that, hey, you're making this differentiation between women, right? You got your HO, your garden utensils and your B's, and then you got real women. That's cognitive dissonance, right? And then especially when you start speaking of, oh, we need to protect women, but yet the language that we use isn't protective of any capacity. And so that's what we're also seeing. Here.
Yeah. That they're separate, and also like we're trying to integrate it in our minds, like trying to kind of see them as. So I'll give you an example, and also a question. As I've been posting about Diddy, there have been more comments that I'm getting about me having an agenda to bring the black man down. I'm on a bandwagon to destroy the black man. Somebody said you was cute until you started minding other people's business. I was like, bro, I've been cute. Like, I don't know what y'all like, cute before and after.
Of course, we all know, right?
I'm joking, but all of these are like real life comments that I'm getting, and I'm wondering, like, could that be an example of this dissonance? This is after we saw the video.
Yeah, I mean, because what does that do to people's reality?
Yeah.
People, well, first and foremost, right? How I engage with social media, and I heard somebody say this a long time ago, and then when I really start to think about it, I was like, exactly. I look at everybody as being bots, right? I look at everybody as being bots. And we know that bots are a real thing. Right. We're about to come upon election time. So we're going to see some accounts change over from Bitcoin to pro-Trump and things like that. And how they operate is they put these comments in. And so once I started thinking about, hey, you know what? These aren't real people. You click them. They don't have an Avi. They don't have a profile pic. It's just like, are they real? So that's helped me in my engagement or lack thereof on social media with folk. But yeah, listen, man, but let's just say these are real people.
Yeah.
Right. When we think about enslavement, right, there was black folk who were overseers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Who did the master's bidding for them. Right. We see that in present day. And so if you're talking about somebody who I like, who I love, who I'm aligned with, yeah, allegations aren't going to be enough. And I'm sure we'll talk about that. No, I need to, and it reminds me of this Dave Chappelle skit, right? From the Chappelle show when he was talking about Robert Kelly. He was like, listen, what I need to see is, I need to see Robert, he needs to be urinating. I need to see his grandmama in the background with a blindfold, with the mask on. I need to see his driver's license for me to say that it's him. Otherwise, because I know what they do out here in the digital media era. But this is how a lot of people feel. And even after it, man, like, listen, again, we're human beings, right? We're man, we're fallible. People perpetuate unhealthy-ish all the time for their own reasons, right? But this is where we talk about the psychology of just people, man. I still like to believe that people are inherently good. But yeah, people make unhealthy choices, and it may be going on here where, listen, if I'm a black man and black men have been, persecuted here in America for hundreds of years, and I've been persecuted personally, that may shape how I view how other black men are treated, whether rightfully or wrongfully, right? And so it's going to take a lot more. So this is where we talk about this idea of black
Yes,
protectionism,
let's go there.
right? It's like I'm gonna protect you at all
Right.
costs. It's like, one of the perfect examples is Michael Vick, with the dog fighting, right? It was just like, all right, white folk, listen, you know what I mean? Listen, he did a little dog fighting. We tried to rationalize, he from the South, made a poor choice. But now y'all just piling on. And so you know what? We're gonna insulate them, right? Because of how you're responding. God bless the ancestor, you know what I mean? Orenthal James Simpson,
Yeah.
right? Like, it wasn't about what you never hear me say whether OJ did it or not, right? That's just that's not how my blackness is set up right now. You know what I mean? It's just like, I can't, because I know what the system has done for him. So even if I might think that he killed, those white folk, can't necessarily say that. Why? Because I got to protect them, because I know what you've done to people, for black folk and black men specifically, for centuries. You know what I mean? Now it was just like, OJ, you need to go sit down. Right. Now he went to go try and steal his own stuff back. You know what I mean? Steal his Heisman Trophy and stuff back. It's like, all right, Juice.
Doing too much.
You ain't relaxed. You know what I'm saying? So, but that's what we talk about when we talk about, like black protectionism, and why people might do this in social media streets.
And it very much feels like a defense mechanism, right? Like something we had to do as a response to historical oppression from our people. But like, when does it become unhealthy? How do we recognize when it's becoming an unhealthy habit?
I mean, people got to speak truth to power. People got to call it out, right? Like, it's important for when we talk about brothers who are saying, who are defending him in some capacity, other brothers gotta stand up and say, yo, you did wrong, right? It's not, when we talk about domestic violence and sexual assault and rape culture, which predominantly impacts women, right? We know that men are impacted as well, as victims / survivors, but it's not going to be women who stop that. It's going to be other men speaking up, speaking truth to power, to go under somebody's comment and be like, yo, fam, you tripping. Right? You're wrong. No, I'm going to hold you accountable. And that's what we haven't seen in this situation. Anybody holding him accountable, right? For whatever reason. Some people enable, and some people, hey, you know what I mean? It's just like, yo, Cassie stood up. Now Cassie has a little more cachet than Jane Doe.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So she stood up. Now let me stand up too. That empowers me.
How do you feel about 50? I feel like he's been having his foot on Diddy's neck with this whole documentary.
He's a clown. I ain't got no thoughts on Ball. Like, Ball's a stone cold clown. Again, where we talk about the enabling of problematic behavior, right? Like, he doesn't mean black folk well. You know what I mean? He's self-serving. He's always been self-serving. And this is the problem. We don't listen to people when they tell us, yo, I'm about self. You know what I'm saying? And so 50, and we look at the films, that the series, that again, it's entertainment that he's a part of, right? Nothing depicting black folk in healthy ways, right? That should be alarming to black folk who care about one another, right? When we talk about, listen, you almost 50 years old, right? But you're still behaving as a child, right? And so recognizing, hey, he might have got his growth stopped in some capacity, or maybe he grew in certain areas and others he don't. But for me, he's a clown. Like, this is unnecessary. What this also does is this further, victimizes others. You think you're coming at Sean, right? But what you're also doing is you're having others relive this trauma, right? That's experience. You know what I mean? And you don't necessarily have to.
When I tell you, you are blowing my mind right now. Like, I don't think I've heard that perspective, Phil. Okay, so you were talking about how Diddy's reaction, or 50's reaction to Diddy, isn't necessarily helping the situation, but more so coming from a place of servitude. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, so I guess for me, I always ask the question, the Sonia Sanchez question of, how does this free us, right? How does making this documentary free black folk? It doesn't. How does it aid the survivors / victims? Because I think it's important to recognize they both have been victimized by him, but they're also survivors as well. When I think about, the comp that I have for that is the surviving Robert Kelly. I didn't watch that, right? Neither whether part 1 or part 8,
Really?
1 through 8, I didn't watch any of that, right? But apparently there were survivors that are on there were able to speak their
Mhm.
truth about what took place, and that may be cathartic for them in some capacity. I don't know how Kurt, again, real names. I don't know how Curtis it plans to navigate
Mhm.
this, right? Is it just, hey, this is just a timeline of events? Is he going to have people on? Is he going to have experts on? Is he going to have people who are victims / survivors on to tell the real robust
Yeah.
story? If we're talking about how BMF has looked or how power has gone, I don't necessarily think I'm gonna put my confidence in that,
Mm.
right? And hopefully he bring on people who are sensitive to this subject matter. But ultimately, I just think, is this
Yeah.
necessary? Right. And maybe it's not for me to answer. Is it something I'm going to watch? Am I going to be protecting my peace? I hope that, the victims / survivors, if they do participate, that they get something out of it that helps them, either find peace or continue to have the peace that they've had since their experience with him. But yeah, for me, it's just, he's just a cornball, so it's just nutty, and I'm not here for like nutty behavior.
Very much given nutty behavior. By the way, I miss living in Philly with Philly slang. Like down here, I don't know what they be saying. Like what would you say in DMV slang? Like that's, I don't know.
They got instead of two, they got two.
That's
You know what I mean? That's
Baltimore.
all.
That's not even
That's
Baltimore
DMV
is not
though. That's
DMV.
Maryland.
Baltimore is not.
Yes, it is. That's Maryland.
Baltimore is not in the DMV. The DMV is DC, like PG County in Maryland, like those different cities.
Oh, the black bourgeoisie. And
Hey,
no,
yo.
got you. All I know, listen, no shots fired. I know why you moved. You know what I'm saying? That's a discussion for another
We'll
pod.
keep that on a
but come back.
different pod.
Yeah, come back home, sister. Come back home. We
Hey,
miss
yo.
you.
Okay, so we're joking right now, but very serious conversation. I know we've been talking a lot about like the different reactions that the audience has been having in terms of like what we've been seeing, but I also want to know your perspective in terms of like what the victims or the survivors could be experiencing as well, having to relive this, having to see these things on TV.
Yeah, that's a sensitive
Yeah.
one. And I don't know if I'm necessarily qualified to respond about, because I haven't lived it, right? As a, cis hetero man, it's, my experience is much different. But from what I've seen, right, from people who have responded, who've experienced this Diddy, see, there I go, Sean, who've experienced Sean and has made allegations against him, right? It's hurt, it's pain. They feel re-victimized. I think I saw someone express like shame from it, right? And so, based off their words, those are the feelings I'm guessing. It's not necessarily a population that I work with where I can, I feel comfortable in having that,
No,
that
That's
conversation.
fair. And I love that you acknowledge that as well. Thinking about like the accountability piece too. I know we kind of touched on it a little bit, but like what would it take in order for Sean Combs to show the public that he's being held accountable, that he's taking ownership? And is there any chance for him to be redeemed in this?
Yeah, so about the accountability piece, what you don't do is what he did with that video, right? I make jokes that, your background is, you're in a penthouse suite somewhere, but you can't be on an island somewhere. You know what I mean? You got the palm trees, going, because optics matter too. That's why they have PR people who come, no, listen, you're going to put this suit and tie on, you're going to dress preppy, you're going to do X, Y, and Z, you're going to enunciate, because this has to be believable by the public, right? So you don't do what he did. He never addressed, in this instance, Cassie Ventura. He didn't name her, right? He didn't apologize directly to her. He apologized to us. And I'm like, fam, I pay you no mind. Why are you saying sorry to me? Why are you apologizing? Right? To the world for what they saw. Again, this disconnect, right? It's where like that's not accountability. You need to name it. You need to speak explicitly as to what was on the video, right? You need language. Listen, I grabbed her. I kidnapped her. I punched her. It's explicit language, but we need to know exactly what it is. You can't be vague about the apology. It's like when a child, and this is what the apology was. It's like a child, you put a child on timeout, or you find out, it's just like, well, I'm sorry. Well, what are you sorry for? For doing that thing that you was upset about. Well, what thing? I mean, like it's no, you need to name it, you need to own it, you need to stand on it. So that was the worst thing he could have done. Again, the apology wasn't for me, so I really don't care. Right? With that being said, he should have stayed silent. Right? He shouldn't have said anything if that's what you were going to come out with. And again, it's just like who's advising you? Right? You this billionaire, allegedly, who's advising you? Why not just be quiet? Right? Why not just go off the grid for a minute? Then you come back, you get you a Ayan Levanzant, you know what I mean? You get you a Gayle King. Oprah might sit down with you a year from now. Ain't that what Will did? Will went off the grid after he slapped Chris Rock.
He fell back.
And we talk about that, right? Like after he slapped Chris Rock, again, another instance of violence, right? And we need to start really looking in people's past, because the way we view same gender violence is completely different than we view gender-based violence against others, right? And so it's just like if you look at Sean Combs' history, he hit Steve Stout over the head with a bottle, right? He's been physically violent towards other people. Why do we think that this automatically changes in one's interpersonal, intimate relationships, rather? Because why? We've normalized violence to this extent. So when we talk about accountability, I don't know why he said anything. He should have went off the grid. He should have came back and then, listen, I went and got therapy. So you're telling me you went and got therapy after the 2016 incident, but then just in November, December, when this dropped, you said it was a bold-faced lie and that you're going to be vindicated. So I don't know the therapist that you went to, but there's no accountability in that. If it came out and said, listen, what's alleged in this lawsuit is correct. I made heinous choices in life because I don't think he's lying when he said, he punched on Drake, right? Like he did, right? He slapped him in the club in Miami over, again, think about the things he's slapping people over, right? He's slapping people over a beat. Right. And so we think if you're slapping people over that, you think, things that he might deem more serious, he's not going to be physically violent. Right. But taking ownership of what was alleged instead of deflecting and denying that these things even took place. And then when we talk about just this idea of redemption, listen, I'm a firm believer that I don't think any Black person is disposable in that way. Right. And so, you make unhealthy choices. He's made unhealthy choices for a very long time. Does that mean you can't be of service to Black folk at some point, some other point in your life? Is it going to be tomorrow? Probably not. You know what I'm saying? We talk about, I don't know if you're familiar with Tookie Williams. So Tookie Williams, he got executed. He was on death row. He was gang affiliated. He allegedly killed folk. And during that time, his incarceration, he had time to sit down. And he started to realize the choices that he made were unhealthy. He started coming out with children's books and started having conversations. He started being an asset to the community instead of a liability. And so, again, we're talking about things like murder, rape, sexual assault, et cetera, et cetera. From my perspective, I can't tell other folk how to, whether they forgive him, whether they accept it. Right. That's up to them. And they're well within their right. Right. If Cassie's just like, she came out today, earlier, and said that, this is why it's important to believe women. That's her perspective, right? I can't tell her how to feel about Puff going forward. She could say, I don't care what he does for the next 30 years. If he gives his life to God, Allah, whoever, and he starts doing work that benefits Black folk, I can't tell her she can't still feel aggrieved. You know what I'm saying? But I do think from my perspective, value can still be had. Yeah. And offered.
I believe so too. I'm in agreement with you that there are so I think that throwing away Black people as a result of like mistakes or because they're no longer valuable to the community or because they harmed us in some way, I don't think that that's aligned with humanity, number one, but also like we get thrown away in general by white supremacy. So why would we align ourselves with that? Like historically we've been oppressed, and I don't agree with that. Kelly Price
But
though.
with that said, I just want to say,
Yeah.
now I'm here for people going to go sit down for a very
Yeah,
long
for
time.
sure. For
You know what I
sure.
mean? Like if I don't hear from them, hey, that's what it
Right.
is. Like I'm not gonna hear from Robert
Yeah.
again. I could care less. You sit down. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
again, but you have to show and prove, especially if we're talking about community.
Yeah. I think I agree with that. But also because I don't know if it's because I'm soft, but of course, like I'm praying for Cassie, I'm praying for her and her well-being or what have you as a survivor. And also there's this piece of me that still like grieves what Diddy did, what he experienced. I'm thinking like, what has he experienced in his own life that led up to this? I'm worried about his kids, like all these different things. And like when you do see people kind of standing up and kind of like praying for him or what have you, like the Kelly Price of it all, people come for her. Like people like.
What up? This is Torre, host of the Hard to Earn podcast. And if you're a fan of music reviews, then be sure to check out and subscribe to Hard to Earn, where my partner Bonsu Thompson and I review your favorite new albums and classic albums on pivotal anniversaries, 10, 15, 20, etc. We review track by track, rating from 1 to that elusive perfect 10. It's brought to you exclusively by the Revolt Podcast Network. Anchored in hip hop, powered by creators.
Like, why is that?
Because people don't know how to read the room.
Okay. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like you got to know how to read the room too. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, it's cool. You don't got to let me know that you praying for them. You could do that. That could be just between you and God. And we can't act surprised when folk come back or they lash back like, oh, well, I'm just praying for them. Yeah, but do you see what's happened? Like, that's what comes with the territory, especially the landscape, the social media landscape, which we find ourselves navigating. You know what I'm saying? And so, yeah, when you come up with, there's a part of me that empathizes with him as well, right? So again, I keep bringing up Robert when the stories came out that he was sexually abused when he was younger, and folks say, well, it's your trauma, it's your responsibility, which again puts the onus on the individual. When we start looking at the community and the collective, like how we may necessarily have failed the victim/survivors of those impacted by Robert. No different than here. We've enabled Puff. Absolutely. Right? I went and bought No Way Out when it dropped for $13.99 from Sounds of Germantown. That money went right to his pocket. That money influenced his ego. Right? I'm not explicitly condoning him, sexually assaulting, being domestically violent towards, the women and men in his life. It's not just women that he's victimized in some capacity, but I'm enabling it, right? And this is what we find ourselves up against, right? We want to reduce harm, but we also perpetuate harm as well, right? Absolutely. I saw Dee Barnes, right? And so she's who Dr. Dre, I don't know his real name. She's who Dr. Dre beat up. Yeah. Dr. Dre just got a humanitarian whatever award named after him at the Grammys or whatever award show it is. And it's just like, well, but this goes to how society is. You give us some headphones, right? And you give us the Chronic 2001 and we here for you. We write back. We won't forget what you did. And Dee Barnes said, listen, this reminds me of what Bull did. But we don't pay her no mind because why? Society doesn't take women serious, let alone believe. You know what I mean?
Well, is Dee Barnes? I'm not familiar with her. Is she Black? Okay. Yeah. And
but he has a history of being assaultive. Michelet.
Yeah.
It's something right. Again, assaultive towards her. This is in Dr. Dre's catalog, right? His historically. Not to say he couldn't have evolved, but this is just how in many countries, not just this country, how we view violence against women specifically.
Yeah. And going back to what you said, I know I'm kind of jumping all over the place. But you were even talking about how like there is this we see there's a significant difference in how we see individuals who assault other men, so like same gender assault versus like assaulting someone of the opposite sex. And so if we're going to hold people accountable in our community, how can we start to kind of reframe how we're seeing violence?
I mean, people got to speak truth to power about what it looks like, right? I'm known to say, like, people complain about gun violence, right? It's like how it's changed, over the course of decades. And I'm like, yeah, it has. But that doesn't mean violence has, right? Back in the 80s, other brothers was punching brothers in the face, right? Jumping on people. The same type of anger that it takes to punch somebody else. If you got a gun on you, right, that's the same anger to pull that trigger, right? And so we're talking about access and means in this regard, because the violence is still the violence, right? And then you hear old heads say that we used to box it out because guns aren't as prevalent. I mean, they were prevalent then, but as we talk about accessibility, it's even more accessible now, right? And so it's not about this, I don't want to see another brother hurt or die. It's what does the means look like? Right. And so we need to have real conversations, and, the penalties, what do they look like when it's violence? Right. We watch Ray Rice, some people will say, I'm not one of them. Right. They say what Ray Rice did on video, literally knocking his wife, his girlfriend turned wife out on the elevator and knocking her unconscious and then picking her up and carrying her out was more egregious than what Sean Combs did, right? And now he'd end up not playing football again after that, right? But he's still going on, and I believe he got treatment and he started to work through things. But how are we viewing this, right? Who else has he been punching out? We have these aggressive, violent sports, and we're like, oh my gosh, how can this football player punch his wife? Well, his work, his life is predicated on violence, and we're asking people to turn this off. And then they be like, well, everybody doesn't do that. Facts, but everybody isn't the same, right? And so we need to be mindful of this. We need to look at what violence looks like and really assess what violence look like, especially amongst us Black folk. We can't romanticize the violence of yesteryear, where we got in fist fights and things like that, or I beat that girl up because she's another girl. It doesn't mean anything.
Wow. The romanticization, I don't know if that's a word, of violence. The romanticization of violence. I think that's that's something for us to think about. Phil, I definitely appreciate your time. I think that going through this and really digging deep into this really has caused self-reflection on my end, self-reflection on the viewers end. So we appreciate you. My final question, and you can let me know if you don't feel comfortable answering this, but
I told you, ain't nothing I don't feel comfortable unless you ask even for my social, but my taxes jacked up. So you can
join the club. Go ahead. Join the club. I did my second late filing. But okay, so there was we talked about how like Black women often aren't believed. Women in general aren't believed, but oftentimes like Black women, if we add the extra level of oppression when we talk to other people about violence, how can we empower Black women more, just to kind of like start speaking up for themselves? Even you as a girl dad, like what would that look like?
Yes, it's interesting, right? It's interesting. So I think about my daughter, and some days I regret it. She's 15 now. But I made exactly right. I made a conscious decision to never tell her because I said so. And I know that's the easy go-to for a parent. Like she may ask something 12 times when she was 5. And it's just like, I'm going to answer it 12 times. I'm going to try to control my emotions as I'm answering it, not to get frustrated. But she's asking me because she's inquisitive about the world around her and her trying to make sense of things. Right. And so for me, I never wanted to stifle her voice because the world is going to try and do that. You know what I mean? Regardless. So it's important that in the home, I make sure that she's her own human being. Right. And so she's not my vanity project. And I had to realize that after some years. Right. Like she's not, Lil Felina. She's Kaylin. You know what I mean? And she's going to grow up to be her own woman. And my job is just to guide. My job is to empower. My job is to admit when I'm wrong. My job is to encourage her to use her voice and make sure that she knows that her voice is powerful. Right. It's me recognizing that as a man, like I don't know everything. You know what I'm saying? Even though I know everything, no, but it's just to make sure that I recognize how I'm showing up. And listen, it's something that I'm continuously, learning and unlearning. I got some folk who who challenge me on that, and I may be resistant at times, but I need to be mindful, like, hey, Phil, you do have it easier just based off, how you identify, gender wise. Right. Mm-hmm. And I need to be mindful of this. I need to listen. I need to advocate on behalf. I need to recognize that, for me, I don't use the term ally. I say I'm a probationary ally, or I'm an ally on probation, because all it takes is me saying the B word, once, or the H word, or not taking serious. And again, maybe that's the conversation we could have at another time, where this idea of believing versus taking serious, you know what I mean? Because I do think they're different. But taking serious what other folks say and not being dismissive of it, right? I think that's how us, as those who identify as men, how we need to show up in order to help cultivate an environment where folk feel comfortable, where women specifically feel comfortable. I was listening to something, and they did a poll on women being in the woods, right? And who would they rather come up against? Would they rather come up against the bear, or would they rather come up against the man? Right. And the majority of them picked they would rather encounter a bear. And for me, that's telling, right? Because that's the lack of safety, the lack of trust that exists amongst us. Right. Because what the bear going to do is it might be a react, but you really not sure how this man is going to show up. And because you never know what the motives are going to be. Right. You could be there to help, or you can be there to harm. So it makes sense. Hey, let me just deal with the bear. So it's important that for brothers, because that's really all I can speak to. You know what I mean? Because again, it's up to us to make environments, safe enough where women feel comfortable in disclosing whatever it is that they're experiencing.
I think that's so good. I think that's the perfect gem for us to leave off on today. Again, Phil, definitely appreciate your time and the knowledge and wisdom that you dropped today. Tell us what you have coming up and how we can stay connected with you.
Oh, so you could check out and subscribe to Rhetorically Speaking, where you get conversations on anything that's happening in the world today. You'll get my spin on it. Also, the hashtag You Good Man podcast. Subscribe to that. They're both on YouTube and wherever you stream your content. And then also you can keep up with me on social media, Phil_Roundtree.
Awesome. Anything you're selling, like anything you want the people to support you in?
I mean, if you see the merch, if you like the merch, feel free. Again, you can go to my Instagram to see how you can do that. Because if I try to spell out quantifyllc.net, which is Q as in quail, UAD as in dog, EFY LLC.net, it may take a long time, but I just did it. So now you can go on there and you can go get you a Black Healing Matters tee. This is what depression, or this is what anxiety looks like. Tee, hoodie, racer tank, fitted hats, all that. So
love it.
Feel free.
And they're good quality t-shirts, because I had it on the other day. I'm like, wow, there's a good quality t-shirt. Where did I get this from? And I remember
that's all I know is in my life is quality.
Period.
You know what I'm saying? That's it.
I'm here for it. Well, thank you again, Phil. Y'all, so make sure that you tune into everything that Phil has going on. Make sure that you follow him. And y'all can tune into the show next Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Fox Soul. And don't forget, you have the power to create the emotions that you want to experience. God bless.
The doctor in front of your name.
If you went on a road trip and you didn't stop for a Big Mac or drop a crispy fry between the car seats or use your McDonald's bag as a placemat, then that wasn't a road trip. It was just a really long drive. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
At participating McDonald's.